Hey there, it's me again. I'm Sarah, your host, and I'm back with another unique episode at What's on Your Plate. To use the word unique is an understatement, actually, because today's guest is showing up for people in a way many of us have never heard of before. At least I hadn't. Shayleen Halloran is a spiritual teacher and healer, specializing in RTT, or Rapid Transformational Therapy. A survivor of big T trauma herself, Shay has been trained in and practices a therapy that dials down the conscious mind so that you can tap into your unconscious mind and discover the root of all of your problems. And then providing healing so you can get back to living how you have been assigned to and really start living your best life and thriving. Guys, this conversation was not like any other I've shared here before. I ask that you enter this space today with an open mind and heart to hearing about an alternative, more deliberate way of healing all the things that have been stalling your growth. Before we get started, just one last word before we jump into it today. This conversation may be triggering for some. It does mention rape, physical and sexual abuse. Please take care of yourselves. And if you find it to be too upsetting, just opt out of this one today. But with that being said, Shay can help you. There is a way to find healing if you think that you're ready to do so. I'd encourage you to listen. Much love and much light. I give you Shayleen Halloran.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another episode today. I am here today with Shayleen Halloran. Shayleen is a rapid transformational therapist who specializes in helping you discover limiting patterns and beliefs in your unconscious and subconscious minds. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Yes, I'm super interested in the way that you offer healing to people. And I'd love to hear how it all started. How did you find yourself in this space?
Oh, okay. So long story short, I'm just going to go ahead and say that because it's going to be a long story. It always is. I first found myself in the healing world. I guess I entered into it through a yoga practice. When I was in my early 20s, I was struggling with lots of grief. I didn't know it at the time. I was just drunk partying a lot. And I found myself packing on the pounds. So I went to a yoga class because this couple, they seemed like they were very happy. Their energy was just vibrant. And I was like, you know what, that looks like something I need in my life. I started going to the class, and then I ended up just naturally dropping off the drinking pattern because I wanted to get up early in the morning to go to yoga. It felt that good to me. And which was crazy to think about. Back then, I couldn't even sit in a chair pose. Have you taken yoga? Or are you familiar with any?
I know what yoga is. I can't say I've practiced it with much consistency over the years, but it's always something I envision myself getting back to. I think I've not found a good fit personally for myself. Yeah.
Well, okay. So side note, Wednesday nights, I teach at Now Yoga Club in St. John. So
that's excellent to know.
For you. But yeah, I could not, it was in that yoga, I was in the yoga classes, and I could not stand to be in Utkatasana, which is a chair pose, and that my quads would burn. I would be in this pose for a second and I would be like, I can't do it. That's how uncomfortable I was with experiencing discomfort in my life because I was so numb from the drinking, right? Okay. So fast forward, my teachers there, they were like, you should be a yoga teacher. And I just looked past my shoulders. I'm like, who are you talking about? Who are you talking to? but they saw something. I ended up leaving that studio and just kept living my life. And it had always been this spark in the back of my mind. It had helped me so much and it made me feel so good. I always felt like I wanted to get back to the practice. And then I was in my undergrad at in college, taking some psychology classes, and I was learning about PTSD. And whenever I was learning about PTSD, I was learning that my family had experienced it. My dad had undiagnosed PTSD. He was a Vietnam War veteran. And I was checking all of these boxes. I was like, okay, we experienced that. So holy crap, my family had PTSD. Yoga would be great for these people. And I was driving on my way to the bar that I worked at, and then I saw these big lights, yoga teacher training. And I was like, oh, this is a sign. So then I pulled in, and then I went to a yoga teacher training informational meeting. And the teacher, Catherine Ashton, she was talking about PTSD. And I was like, okay, this is it. I've got to go here. And they offered free yoga while you were in teacher training. So I was like, okay, I'm sold. And then I went on to Yoga to Transform Trauma. I became a leader in that. And whenever I finished that training, I brought a yoga practice to the Lake County Jail here in Lake County. I brought a yoga practice to the mental health ward, the women's portion of the mental health ward. And that was radical. It was like a crash course on how trauma lives in the body. It was, you want to see what trauma looks like in bodies, Shay? Here you go. And I just was slapped in the face with all of this trauma. It was one of the coolest experiences that I've experienced, but I got quickly burnt out doing that. When I was there, I did not have much of a spiritual connection. I didn't know what God was. I had no outlet, right? I was just practicing because I had the heart for it. And I really do feel like I would have been able to do it differently if I had a good spiritual connection in the first place, because I would have had somewhere to dump it, Right. At that point, it was just me. And all of this trauma that I was hearing about, all of these stories that I was hearing about, it was just, here you go. You're going to hold on to this, Shay. It's not very healthy. It wasn't very healthy. So I ended up leaving there. And I was getting bored with teaching yoga in the public because people would roll out their mats, roll them back in, go back to their normal lives. And I thought yoga had changed my life so much. Why am I not seeing this in my students? Why am I not seeing these transformations happening in my students? And I was like, I must be a crappy teacher if this isn't happening. So I started to ask, how can I help people more? How is it that I can get into the deeper parts of these people to ignite more transformation in them? So I started to ask my mentors, my teachers, my professors, and they were all guiding me into going on to my master's, and I wasn't interested in that. They had, in my undergrad, they kept pushing the DSM-5 in my face, in all of our faces, I guess. They kept on saying like, well, what would you diagnose this person with? What would you diagnose this person? They'd give us case studies. And I was just, my stomach would turn when I would read it, and I would be like, this person needs love. This person has trauma. I wouldn't want to label anything. And I do understand, a side note on that, I do understand that there are times and places for labels and drugs. I don't think that it's necessary to the extent that we're using it today. Right. But that seemed like it was all there was. And I had these spiritual teachers that were just lighting me up, and they were seeing transformations in their students, in their clients. So then RTT, Rapid Transformational Therapy, popped up the week that I started to ask, what can I do? How can I step my game up? Rapid Transformational Therapy was there, and I was like, this is it. I had already studied a little bit about hypnosis. There's this book called The Three Magic Words. It's a cool one. And they were talking about hypnosis and how the mind learns through hypnosis. And as soon as I was putting those two together, it was kind of like I was waking up this genius that's inside of me. I was like, oh my God, this is it. So then I jumped in immediately. I was just pulled to it, just like I was pulled to the yoga teacher training. I had that feeling inside of me. So that's a long story short.
Yeah,
That's how I got into it.
Thank you for sharing all that, though. That's amazing. And for the listeners, can you describe a little bit more about what RTT is exactly?
Yes, it's a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, so CBT, neuro-linguistic programming, and that's NLP for short. They like to put acronyms on everything, right? Psychotherapy and hypnosis, and it's all rolled into one. So what happens is somebody comes to me with an issue, say anxiety, depression, even things like money blocks, or they want to experience more love in their life. They have love blocks. I guide them into an intentional state, and it's just a restful state where we turn down the conscious mind so that we can go directly into the subconscious mind to figure out the root causes of the issues of the presenting problem. So when somebody comes to me, I'll generally guide them back to a time and place in their life, and they're in control the entire time. I'll guide them back to where it all began, because it's anything that they're experiencing today is just a surface level of the underlying issue, the thing that lies beneath, right? And that's in the subconscious. So after we get all of that, we do detective work. We kind of figure out these puzzle pieces together. How has this affected you? What perceptions had you formed? What beliefs had you formed about yourself or the world? And then at the end, I create a transformation audio. And this is a repetitive hypnosis audio that the client will then listen to for the next 30 days to wire in those new beliefs that are going to help them to heal and move into a different way of being.
Wow, that is just such an interesting approach. And I think it's not something that most people in our society really know about or understand. Would you say
you say the word hypnosis and people start running? You know, they think that they're going to be out of control. They're going to be clucking like chickens, you know, talking into their phone or talking into their shoe like it's a phone. And that's not, I wasn't trained in that type of hypnosis. It's like stage hypnosis. And that's not what I'm interested in. Right.
Right. You're not like a magician, right? That's not what this is. It's
I mean, I'm kind of magical, but no,
but not like pulling things out of hats and doing tricks and things. This isn't trickery or woo-woo type of therapy. This is a real approach to mental health.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I know that you have said traditional types of like counseling or therapy, as people kind of know that to be, isn't what resonated with you.
And no,
because of just the constant of it.
Yeah. I would say that was a trauma response from me as well. Now I'm not a fan of traditional talk therapy. I'm speaking from me and my experience. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to offend anybody that is a fan of traditional talk therapy. If that's worked for them, I love that. Anything that works, I'm a total fan of. But for me, I wasn't going to give myself the time to sit and talk about my issues. I went once, and when I was there, she got me to cry, and I was like, well, holy crap, I didn't know that was in there. But then she wanted me to come back again the next week and do it again. And I was like, well, no, I want to get I want to get down. I want to get into the issues. That's why rapid transformational therapy was so appealing to me, because it's like, let's go straight down. It's like a grab the bull by the horns type of therapy. You want results, you want change now. This is the radical way to go for it. But it seems like it's kind of harsh, but it really is so liberating. The people that get up from the sessions after I do an RTT session with them, their faces, it's brighter. It's like you see this relief over them. And it's just incredible that this is, I can offer this to people.
Mhm.
It's so fulfilling.
That's so interesting to me, because I've partook in traditional type therapy and counseling sessions, and I can say, and again, it's for my experience, I'm speaking, that I often left those sessions feeling exhausted, just emotionally and mentally. And there were glimpses of helpfulness too. And I don't, think that it's bad at all for people to seek that type of help, and certainly speaking out loud about things can be helpful. But I know that for me as well, it was just I don't know, sometimes I just felt like worn out, like I needed to like just go lay down for a while afterwards, and I don't know that was the goal.
Right. And that could also be a way of healing. And that's the body saying, okay, let's relax. Let's take it easy, because often and here in America, our go-to is distract, go, do this task, do that next task, just keep jumping. Right. And then the body will want to heal, and we don't let it, because once we're kind of stagnant, that's when emotions pop up. And if we're not comfortable with feeling emotions, it's going to suck, Right. So that could be a way of healing, but also it kind of, to me, it seems like picking out a scab and not letting it heal. Does that make sense?
Yes, I can understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I can understand what you're getting at. How do you think that RTT is a good approach for people of all ages too? What about children that, have experienced some type of trauma? Is it appropriate for that part of our population?
Yes. I've seen as young as 5 years old. And I'm working with children 100% of the time. To be a little mind bender here. There are different protocols that I would use with children under 8 years old. I wouldn't regress them back to trauma. I would just use their imagination, and I would work with them that way, because you're under hypnosis all the way up until you're about 7 or 8 years old already. Your mind is in that theta brainwave state. So you're just constantly absorbing what's around you, and you're not really questioning it. So you're just seeing this is what real life is. And then 8 and above, I would typically, depending on the kid, I would regress them back and then show them you're not this little baby anymore. You're not this little kid anymore. And whenever I say I'm working with children all of the time, whenever I'm regressing folks back, usually they're going back to scenes from their childhood. And what happens is we're in that hypnotic trance. Whenever we're kids, we see traumas, we experience traumas, and that's big T trauma, where that's sexual abuse, that's violence, that's verbal abuse. These are anything that is hurtful, harmful, accidents. And then little T trauma, where your friend didn't share her bike with you whenever you were 4 years old. That's a little trauma for a little kid. And you've been around kids where they seem like they're really over exaggerating their emotions. Those are real. Those emotions are real. And it's our up to us to kind of be like, okay, let's breathe through it, guide them through it, rather than saying, shut up, you're making a scene, and it's not really that big of a deal. To them it is, right?
Right.
So those traumas, they shape our perception, they shape our beliefs, and we carry them with us our entire lives until we check them and say, okay, my friend didn't share her bike with me, and I believed that it was because I wasn't good enough. And that snowballed into, I'm never going to have friends, I'm not good enough to have friends, and blah, 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 whatever happens. Then they get to remediate that. And then with the victims where they've had sexual abuse or physical abuse, so often they're still carrying around that hurt and saying, the world's not safe. It's not safe to be me. And I'm not good enough. So then I upgrade that child part of their brain that says, I'm a little person and I can't handle anything. A lot of times this contributes to the anxiety. And then they come into a more empowered state where they can actually meet the world as the adult that they are without carrying this junk behind them. Does this make sense to you?
Perfect. It makes perfect sense to me. I'm like hanging on every word you're saying here.
Cool.
And it's making a lot of sense to me. And it's, to back up a little bit there, it's interesting. I never really thought about the fact that kids up until age 7 are just naturally in a hypnotic state, because that was going to be my question, is how do you create that safe, and by safe, I mean willing environment, I guess, for a child to participate in that, but really they're already doing it.
They're already there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you talk to kids, they love to be in their imaginations, and I'll just create a story around them, and I'll ask them who's their favorite characters. And then I'll bring them into this scene where they are hanging out with their favorite characters. And then I'll get them to bring up the issue. So say it's, what was that? Last kid that I worked with, he was having trouble sleeping in his own bed. He was 8 years old. He was a big 8-year-old. He was sleeping in his parents' bed. So then I got him to go into his imagination. He just closed his eyes, and then I was telling him to give the fear that he had of sleeping in his own bed, turn him into a character. And then I got him to turn him into this character, and he was like this dark man, an evil, what do you call him? A villain. It was a villain. And then I got him to call in his superhero, and then the superhero came in, and then they had a dialogue, and I was like, well, this is your friend, this guy that is keeping you scared, keeping you from sleeping in your own bed. He's actually here to help you. So what is he doing for you? And then he went into what it was that he was doing for him. So we got understanding in that way. So it's just like you just play out a story, you know. It's so fun to do it with little kids. They're the easiest ones to do it with, actually.
That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Before we started this conversation, I don't know that I really even associated what you do with children, I guess. And then the question just kind of popped into my mind if that was a thing. So that's really interesting that's, the way children, I guess, see things differently than adults, obviously. And
Mm-hmm. They're more open.
Right. They're more open and willing to, I guess, step into that unknown a little bit. Maybe they're not even realizing it. It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that notion that has often come up for many of us, or you might, a quote that you might have heard is something along the lines of raise your children in a way that they don't need to recover from anything, or so they don't have to go to therapy. But I think that that's probably pretty realistic, because it doesn't have to be a big T trauma thing
Mm-hmm.
that causes the need for the types of healing that you offer.
Yeah, and so I love that you brought that up, because I do have clients that come to me and they're like, I didn't have any trauma in my life. I've got great, wonderful parents, but they're struggling with addiction. a lot of, and I'm not, this isn't 100%, but a lot of these people that come to me, they didn't get a chance to build that resiliency muscle. So they weren't challenged. And I'm not saying you need to traumatize your kids to challenge them, right? That's why we have our kids in karate. This was my idea of like, okay, I need to build resilience. I'm fresh out of, I'm not traumatizing my kid. Let me send her into karate so she can build that stamina, that resilience there. But a lot of these folks, their parents were helicopter parents, and they micromanaged their children. They never got a chance to learn how to do life for themselves. And that turns into low self-esteem. That turns into this void, like, what am I here for? What can I do? My whole life is perfect. And they quote unquote perfect, but then they become to be fearful to take any risks because their parents didn't let them take any risks, right? So I don't know if that went off topic of what you were just saying, but I do get folks that never experienced quote unquote trauma that are still feeling unfulfilled, still feeling depressed. So I don't know if that's really that great of advice. Just do your best, right?
Right. No, and that's it. That explained it really well, because I think there's a lot of people walking around, like you just described, that don't have big T trauma in their childhood or in their history, but they're still struggling with things like self-criticism or low self-esteem or money issues or food issues or any number of things that are holding them back from really just stepping into their best life. And they can't really figure out why.
Yeah. And a lot of those folks, whenever they come in, I guide them into living a more soul aligned life, right? They're lacking purpose. They're lacking intention because we're not really taught to live intentionally. So I bring them into more mindfulness practices too, to look for the things that bring them joy, look for the things that they can study endlessly, things that intrigue them. Then they can begin to say, oh, you know what? This is what I might be here for. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Really pulling back those layers to look for that purpose so that they can really understand that they've really been in like even a low vibration of a depressive state for a long time, but really haven't been able to put a finger on that so much because they're going about life in a way that feels productive to some degree and quote unquote normal,
right,
but without a specific purpose or way of serving.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest keys to happiness is being of service. And that doesn't mean like being a server at a restaurant. I mean, if that is what brings somebody fulfillment, yes, do that. That brought me fulfillment for a long time. But to be of service in your unique way, it just fills life up. It makes it feel so amazing. There's the labor of love that comes in there. And then there is a built-in resiliency that comes with that, because it's like, I would do this for free and I would do this all of the time because I love it so much. And then there's going to always be life drawing you back, giving you lessons. I call them blessings. So there's going to be hardships in life because that's the way life is built, right? But it's going to help you to keep getting up and going back into it. That's where growth happens.
Right. I fully agree with what you're talking about. And the fact that being of service is so important, because the opposite of depression is purpose, not specifically happiness. That happiness comes from said purpose.
Yeah. And happiness is it's a flowing emotion. It's not a destination. It's something that you experience. That's not the end all be all, right? I can still experience happiness even whenever I'm experiencing a bad day. I feel like that's more of like a bliss feeling, right? I still have peace inside of me, even though I know that I'm struggling today with whatever it is that I'm struggling with. Does that make sense?
Right. No, it makes absolute sense. Like it's not a bad life just because you're having a bad moment or a bad day even. And knowing that you're supposed to feel all those things too. You're
A
supposed
rainbow of
to
emotions. Yeah.
everything, right? I mean,
Mhm.
the end all goal shouldn't just be, I want to be happy. How do I get to happy? I think
Mhm.
in our culture, we put so much emphasis on that. And while that's great, you can't have happy without everything else.
Yeah. How could you experience happiness without sadness?
Right.
You wouldn't even
appreciate
know
it.
what it is. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I agree with you 100%. And just to expand on how you reach people in what you do, what you offer isn't just for people that say, I have this issue or I'm struggling with finding this, next level of purpose. You also work with entrepreneurs or business owners, people who feel, I hesitate to use the word stuck, but sort of limited, I guess, in why they're not progressing forward in that manner. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. And I do believe that all entrepreneurs should be on a personal development path. I really like the entrepreneur journey because it does mirror the spiritual journey heavily, right? There's so much soul seeking that needs to happen. There's so much internal work that needs to happen whenever you're on the entrepreneurship journey. And I really do feel like if you're an entrepreneur, your work needs to be soul aligned. Otherwise, you're not going to make it, right? So whenever you're working for yourself, there are limiting patterns that you'll come up against. For the most that I see people, they'll come in and they'll feel like they've got money blocks. They're like, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to. I'm marketing the way that I'm supposed to. But there's just this thing that I don't feel right taking money or whatever it is. There's a money block there. So then we go back and figure out the how's whys of the money block. And a lot of times, if we're not conscious of our money patterns, we're just replaying old money patterns from our parents or even our grandparents. And we're not that removed. We're actually going into another depression, right? But we're not that far removed from the Great Depression mindset where it was work hard so you can eat. Right? Yeah. So we're playing out a lot of those generational patterns, or even just looking at, did your parents, whenever you were growing up, did your parents live paycheck to paycheck? Are you reflecting that in your life today? And a lot of times there is, yes, they're just continuing on with the same way that their parents spent money. Or even the way that their parents overspent money, the way that their parents were frivolous with money. There's a lot of repeating patterns in that, and it affects the entrepreneurs in that way. Now, not everybody uses money, so that's not specific to entrepreneurs, right? But a lot of them do come in with money blocks, and they're like, how do I get over this? How do I expand? How do I grow? How do I grow my business? And it would be, I'm not enough. The subconscious belief in most of these issues is, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. Who am I to do this? And the thing that it is that these entrepreneurs are coming through, they just feel like this mission is so big. They're like, who am I? How am I able to do this? So that's that limiting pattern.
Right. So somebody comes to you with that exact scenario, you, under the hypnosis that you provide, dig into their subconscious to pull out whatever is causing that limiting belief.
Yeah. Yes, because you asked about for me to go into the subconscious and what that is, right?
Yes.
Before in the email. So I'll go into that and why that's a such a big portion of the personal development that you need to dig into, to work into. So we only spend about 5% of our day, and 3 to 5% of our day in our conscious mind. So that's in the mind that we're talking to right now. We're consciously making decisions, we're talking to each other, but then the rest of the day we're in our subconscious or our unconscious. So it's about 95 to 97% of our days is run by automatic patterns that are going on in our mind. And this is automatic patterns that were written for us either in our childhood or even previous generations. So our parents' childhood, their parents' childhood, were a culmination of all of these things. And then there's also other influences. There's society influences, cultural influences, religious influences, the way that we were taught in school, our family, I said that already, but all of these different things, it's just this autopilot program that we're running on. And if those programs have limiting beliefs in us, we're not even thinking about the choices that we're making. And that's what's keeping us small. So it's what's called a paradigm. And imagine that a paradigm is just this box that you live in. So you can't really see what's outside of the box because the mind is just tuned into what is familiar. So it's kind of like you have tunnel vision of this is what life is, this is what I'm going for. And you get stuck in that. So that you're stuck in that repetitive program. It's hard to get out of that because you can't see on the other side of it. So then going into the hypnosis, you're able to take a closer look and challenge the beliefs, challenge what's in there. And like I said, a lot of times it's just bringing the adult mind into the child mind. And then we reparent the inner child in that way. Is this making sense?
I'm soaking it in. I'm definitely soaking it in. I'm learning more and more as you talk about this, and it's just so interesting. Two things come to mind with what you just spoke on, and one of them is the multi-generational influence.
Yeah. I love to get into that.
Yeah, I have listened to things and read on things that the way that we behave today, how we are as people individually, those influences, it's not just about after you were born. That's even from the womb.
Yeah.
And that's like from the womb, by people who our own mother didn't even have direct influence from.
Right. Yes. And that's so for the subconscious begins recording about midway through pregnancy when you're in the womb, and we're in that heavy hypnosis up until 7. But you have memories from being inside of your mother. You have subconscious neural pathways from being inside of your mother. But there's also the epigenetic, the energetic frequencies that are passed down through the cells of your body. So think about, I'm sure this is going to elaborate, but you were inside of your mother as an egg whenever your mother was inside of your grandmother. Now, that energy is being passed down through the DNA. What your grandmother experienced, the stresses that she experienced, are also being played out in your genetics today.
That makes absolute clear sense to me.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. And this is there's a great book that you can read on this. It's called It Didn't Start With You. And that's by Mark Wolin. It Didn't Start With You. And it talks about the energy that is passed down through generation to generation. And even scripture talks about this. So there's in the Bibles, and I'm not talking about just the Christian Bible, but in the Torah, and all of these different scriptures, they talk about this intergenerational pattern moving through us. So it's really cool. It predates us in the way that we scientifically know about the DNA, about how energy gets passed on. It's so wild. It's a rabbit hole to deep.
It is. And it does sound like radical and wild and, far-fetched, but when you really stop to think about that, it makes perfectly clear sense.
And I feel like we all need to just stop and think about things. And I think that's why life gets away from us so much, is because we're so busy. We don't have enough time to do our introspection, to actually look at, why am I doing this thing? Why am I holding on to this pattern?
Right.
It could be just as simple as just like asking why the heck am I doing this?
I think what we have done, like you said, sort of in an autopilot, or conscious or subconscious rather, manner, it just becomes so routine and so just automatic that we don't even stop to question why we're doing anything that we're doing. For the most part, it's just what is, right?
And that's part of why I'm such a great rapid transformational therapist, because my whole life has been asking why. My dad hated it. I was like, don't ask why, kid. That's what he would say. Don't ask why, kid. So then I would always ask, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? What is the meaning of this? So I always loved to dig into things and the whys, the hows things work. And if it didn't make sense, I'm like, well, why don't we fix this? Well, there's got to be a better way. That's the way my mind works.
If we could all have a little bit more of that perspective, I think that we'd all be in a lot more healed state than we are walking around.
And it's possible for us all. It's possible for us all if we just begin to sit. There's no such thing as wasted time sitting, and it's really, we do need to sit more.
What do you think the biggest limitation or excuse, I guess might be a better word, as to why we don't do that? Why don't we allow ourselves that time and space
to sit,
to really reflect in ourselves,
to reflect
like that?
And to ask for one, those whys. We don't think to do it, right? We're an autopilot, and a lot of people just don't want to question what is. Because that requires challenging the ego, and the ego does not want to be challenged. The ego doesn't even want to be seen. And the ego is that subconscious program that's basically limiting you. And whenever it gets challenged, it's like the world's going to end. It's kind of dramatic. It thinks like we're all going to die. We're going to lose everything. We're going to lose everything. We're going to lose all of the people that we love. It throws in all of these fabricated stories to keep you in the box. So that's one reason that we don't do it. And then another reason is we are just addicted to distractions. We're addicted to our social media. We're addicted to Netflix. We're addicted, and those are the little A addictions, right? So we got the big A addictions with the drugs, the sex, alcohol. We're addicted to not feeling, and asking these questions why. It requires you going, lifting the veil and seeing that there is some trauma back there. There is some hurt. There is some pain. And this is another thing, we're not taught to say, like, it's okay to feel sadness. It's okay to feel this hurt. It's okay to acknowledge that this is here. So maybe those are reasons why we don't do it.
It's a great explanation. Yeah, that is just such a great explanation. And again, it makes perfect sense. Backing up a little bit again, I had another question about something that you talked about in regards to, we're just walking around in our days, essentially, just going through the motions, sort of on that autopilot, and just doing habitual things, just because that's what we've trained ourselves to do, essentially, I guess, as a way to be numb. One thing that comes to mind, and I'm not sure if it's something that you'd have an answer for, if that's the case, and we just sort of fall into our habits like that, why do we have such a hard time falling into good habits if we fall into bad habits so easily?
A lot of times habits are serving us in some way. I would say 100% of the time our habits they think they're serving us, even whenever they are detrimental to our health and our mental health, even whenever they seem to be sabotaging us. A lot of times the habits want to protect you, and they think moving out of that protection, it's the death. That's the death of the ego. And that's the thing that the ego is so scared of. So let me think about a habit that somebody had recently. Okay. So I had a woman come in for weight release. She had a habit of eating too much, binge eating. And whenever we asked what the role was of the habit, it was there to protect her because the extra weight was her form of protection. And it was not okay. It was not safe for her to be seen because she had experienced sexual trauma in the past. So that habit of overeating was there to protect her, to keep her safe, because if she was quote unquote ugly, then she wouldn't be attacked. And this was trauma that she hadn't unpacked from her childhood. So as soon as we were able to install the feeling of it's safe to be thin, it is safe to be healthy, you're an adult now, you can get out of these situations if you need to. As a child, it was harder for you to get out of, right? We were able to challenge that. I guess I took that to a deeper, darker level, but this is how the mind works. The habits usually are some form of protection. Or there's another side to that. Sometimes those habits are there to destruct, to be sabotage, because the person is carrying some guilt from the past. They're having trouble forgiving themselves, and they think that they don't deserve to be happy. So it's like this punishment the self-punishment that they put onto themselves. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. Another thing that the entrepreneurs will come in where they're struggling getting to that next level. It will be that underlying, that subconscious belief that says you don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. So they'll keep putting the stick in the spokes of the wheel, I guess, where they just shoot themselves in the foot. They just keep sabotaging their progress.
So when people come to you, do they generally know consciously what is holding them back and they just can't get past it themselves? Or it's something that they have either forgotten or blocked out? Or could it be a combination of both?
It's a combo. Yes. Most of the time, the subconscious has a whole different story than what the conscious mind thinks. So I thought whenever I was going into RTT, when I was going into my sessions, I had the belief that I wouldn't be able to do what I was passionate about and make a living. And I thought consciously, I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. It's going to go back to me seeing my dad be violent to us whenever he was drunk, because he would black out and have these episodes. This was part of the PTSD that he was experiencing. I was like, yeah, for sure. It's going to go back to a scene for that. No, it did not. It went back to me seeing my mom. She was an artist. And she would carve these wood spirits. She would paint. She was a photographer. She loved to be creative, but she could only do it on the weekends. She could only do it for small periods of time. She had to go to work, a 9-to-5 job at a manufacturing plant. So she had to do that. And I saw her be passionate about this side of her, and she couldn't do it to make a living. So I formed the belief, right? This was the subconscious belief that you can't do what you're passionate about and make a living. So my conscious mind was not lined up with my subconscious mind, to bring it back to that. I had the idea of what it was going to be. Total different story.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting. So when you yourself went through your initial steps with this type of therapy, was it like eye-opening? Were you like really surprised by what you learned about yourself?
Yes, it was eye-opening. It was so cool. Have you ever heard of inner child work?
Yes.
In this? Okay. So I had heard of, I'd read about inner child work, and I had worked on inner child work, but the actual connection in my mind of like, whoa, that's inner child work, didn't happen until I hit RTT. It was hard for me to connect with little Shay, and the RTT brought that in. And in part of what we do is a big part of what we do is we reparent the inner child. So any of the needs that weren't met as a child, we go in and then we begin to meet that inner child's needs. So that revelation right there was just mind-blowing, and that empowering too, where I was able to actually move through a bunch of those blocks without having to go into the hypnosis. I would see these triggers, and then I would be able to almost immediately connect them to, oh, little Shay believes this. You know what? Let's take care of this. So I would have a dialogue with little Shay.
That's so interesting because, I've participated in different self-development and personal growth types of practices in the past, that some of those ways of exploring had you doing things like, I don't know, writing a letter to your 10-year-old self, or something like that. And I don't know that I could ever really dig deep enough in a way to really know how to connect with her in that way, in that approach of doing it. Would that make sense to you, that was hard to do it in that way?
Yeah. And until I did the RTT, and that was like the connection actually happened. And it was, so yeah, you're describing exactly what I feel like I was feeling.
That is just amazing. And the fact that we can just really go back to, however old people are, 30 years ago or 35 years ago, to our little selves, and just
I've had 70, my oldest client has been 73. And it was funny. I had 3 70-ish year old women come to me back to back to back. And I'm like, you guys are getting it. They were just, I'm tired. This is what they were saying. I'm tired of living for everybody else. I've raised kids. I'm ready to find out who I am. And I'm like, you're never too old to learn, right?
Wow. That's so inspiring, but also like do it sooner.
Do it sooner, for sure. For sure. And I mean, just think about the generation, a 70-year-old today, 20, 30 years ago, this was not available to them. Personal development was not available to them. It was, you have a role at the house. You are a housewife, you work at the house, you do this, So, and there wasn't a lot of challenge to the narrative. And here we're challenging everything, right?
Right.
So
we are.
These ladies are getting on the bandwagon. They're like, I'm ready to live, ready to live. But we can, and it's almost like we're able to bridge the timeline. We're able to go back in time, heal that moment, and then bring them back into the present moment, and they're free of that issue almost instantaneously, because they went back as the adult, healed that little kid, and then they came back and they're like, I'm good. It's so inspiring. It's so cool.
It sounds like that would be just so incredibly freeing and just liberating to unpack all that in a way that is just like this aha moment, like, where have I been my whole life?
Yeah. And that's the power of the RTT, is it just brings a deeper understanding. It's not just like this guessing game of, well, what is it that I'm doing? Why am I doing that? We're actually going in deep. There have been times, to bring this into a little bit of the woo-woo side, there have been times where people have gone into past lives where they've gone into scenes where it wasn't them in this lifetime. Now, I have questions about that myself. Are they truly experiencing a whole different lifetime, or are they tapping into that energy from the DNA and they're experiencing a lifetime from the grandparents? Right. Or even is it just the imagination? Whatever it is, it's working. Like it's a working hypothesis. There's actual liberation and freedom that happens afterwards. So whatever it is that's working out, it's working out. And I don't tend to try to get down into the nitty-gritties and like, I need science right now to get this data to back it up. I'm just trusting. There's a blind trusting that happens at that point.
Well, I don't even know that it's blind so much, because if the result is positive, then that's tangible. Yeah. Then that in and of itself is the answer that this transformation was in the right direction for them, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Whatever it was. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about when somebody has gone through this therapy with you and they have awoken their subconscious and they've learned about themselves. And when people learn about things that are scary or things that are upsetting to them, so it's there, they found it. Mm-hmm. What do they do with it then? I mean, they've found it and they've discovered it, but now how do they process it? Is that something that you continue to work with your clients on?
A lot of times whenever we find those traumatic events, we heal it right then and there. I'm not going to leave them raw and open. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. We get the resolve. I don't bring them out of the session unless there is resolve, unless they do feel like I can move forward from this. Whenever that comes, so say it's a childhood memory, I don't know why I just keep going back into sexual abuse, but I've had women go back to where they were 6 years old. Their uncle was molesting them. Is it okay to go into this deep into this?
It is. You can speak as freely as you feel is helpful, and we'll just put a triggering warning in the beginning of this episode. But I think it's good information. Right.
I mean, to be honest, it happens more than we'd like to admit. I'd like to admit that it happens zero, but it happens so much, so often. And there's reported 1 out of 4 women will have experienced some sexual abuse in their life. And that's reported, that is
staggeringly.
Who knows awful. What the unreported statistics are. But where was I going? Okay. So an adult female, 49 years old, goes back, finds out that she was molested at 6 years old. I get her as the adult to go in, and this all happens in the mind, and take that child out of that scene. And then whenever I do that, I get them to just hold that baby, hold that little girl, and then look back at that scene and collapse it into time and space to where it never affects them ever again. And this is what really works. And it all works in the hypnotic trance because the brainwaves are slow enough to accept those suggestions. And then whenever they're out of that scene, I get adult mom to look at that little child and tell her that she is safe now. She is safe now and she can come live with her today. And then I get them to merge into their heart. That works incredibly. It just works. It sounds too simple to be like, really, that's it? But
no, I don't think it sounds simple at all.
That happens. Okay.
Honestly, I mean, like I envision you in the most magical way, like kind of going in and tinkering around to like rewrite the story.
We do. Yeah. We rewrite the story.
Yeah. And what a gift that you give to people and that you provide for people to be able to create that just new story so that it doesn't have to be the sad ending that they've been walking around with all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so empowering to witness that. And I'm glad that you said that, because it does seem like it is so simple to me, but I forget that that this is my gift. This is the way that I'm able to help people. And then whenever I start to talk, like I wouldn't be able to create the beautiful cakes that you do, but you see like you have it and you're like, this is so simple, this is so easy, right? This is so
Right.
so yeah, I forget that. I get so caught up in my mind and my lingo and be like, well, of course this makes sense, this and this and this and this is why you do this. They're like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah. But it's true, we're all here for specific assignments.
Yeah.
And your heart, my heart is different than your heart, and easy is, one thing for this person and that for another. So it's just getting past whatever is limiting us in our own minds to be able to provide set assignments.
Yeah, for sure.
And you've gone through it yourself to be able to get to the point to provide at the level that you do. So, everybody starts somewhere, right? And initially what you offer was hard for you, but now it's just your life.
Yeah, it was. I remember I was in yoga classes when I was teaching the yoga classes, and I would sense the feelings that were in the room, and then I would target the person that was there, and then I would say these things to them, but then they would totally shut down and be like, well, you weren't feeling that too. And then they would come back and be like, oh, you just broke something open. So that was part of my gift that I was waking up to, that I didn't realize that everybody else was feeling other people's feelings. That's a clairsentient. That's one of the gifts that I had. I didn't realize it was an actual, I don't know, unique. Yeah. So it definitely took me realizing that this is a tool that I have. This is a tool that I've been given so that I can give it back to the world. That's been a journey.
Yeah, like most amazing things are, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, Shay, everything you said today is just so inspiring, and I'm sure I will be spending more time with you in the future on my own uncovery and discovery journey, because everything you say just makes so much sense. And at the end of the day, even people that may be skeptical to this type of approach, it's like, what do you really have to lose? Just try it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because really, what is there a downside to what you offer, I guess, is the follow-up question to that comment.
I haven't experienced much of a downside. No. People would, on the outside, they would be like, okay, that's a little too radical, but there have been people do quit their jobs after sessions. They get divorced, they experience breakups. That does happen. I would say on the outside, you would say, okay, that's a downside, but they're coming more into alignment with who they truly are. And that is, that's liberating right there, for them to be able to have the self-confidence and say, you know what, this isn't working for me anymore. You're going to keep disrespecting me. And their bosses, they're going to keep talking to them that way. And they're like, my self-worth is, I'm worthy. I don't need this anymore. So then they ended up going to Splitsville. So that does happen. And that's a part of the journey, but everything else is just so incredibly liberating to come into your authentic self and to have your heart out playing in the world. It's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous.
It sounds just like the most amazing approach to most things in life. And I don't know, anytime that you step into really your own truth, I don't know that even is something to be considered a downside. It might be a little bit challenging initially,
It
looking,
is.
quitting your job and, starting something else. But what a amazing gift to be able to really just lean into who you're supposed to be.
Yeah. And what's the other option? Just keep zombieing it through the world and just
Right.
that's the stares that I see. That's the blankness, and the people that are not checked in and ready to play. They're out. Their soul is somewhere else. And I'm like, come back home, guys. This world is amazing. Come join me.
I love your enthusiasm, and it's just so clear to see what this has done for you and your life, because you just radiate lights.
Thank you.
And you can really just see just how powerful this has been for you.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to offer it. It's like a good cake recipe, you try this out. This is amazing. Yeah.
Well, you've made me a believer today, just like I make people believers in delicious cakes. So gosh, I thank you so much for everything you shared today.
You.
Shay, tell everybody where they can find you and what the best way is to connect with you.
I'm on the social media, Shayleen Halloran. And then also I have a website, www.transformwithshay.com. That's the best way to go in and start kind of checking out what I do. At this moment, I do have a donation-based money block RTT session coming up at the Culinary Masterpiece on August 19th, the evening there. So that would be a cool thing to offer to the world. Have people come out to. So you can come out to that. It's a Friday night.
Cool.
Other than that, that's how you get me. That's how you get at me.
Cool. So for our listeners, Culinary Masterpiece is a local culinary school in Crown Point, Indiana. So there'll be links to ways to connect with Shay in the show notes today. And also we will get something out for that event she's talking about on, you said August 19th. Is that correct?
Yep.
August 19th. So we'll make sure that people are aware of that as well. Anything else, Shay, that you would like to leave our listeners with? Any final thoughts?
Of course, there's going to be fear whenever you're talking about going into a session like this. There's going to be fear, but like you said, what's the downside? Just challenge that fear. Go for it. Life's a roller coaster. Like, we need to get in the game. We need to come alive. So yeah, challenge that fear. Challenge any of the fears that say don't go there. Mental health speaking. No, don't go down dark alleys. You're unsafe, right?
Don't go down dark alleys by yourself in the middle of the night. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I feel like anytime there's hesitation with something that can so powerfully help you, you're just getting in your own way. You're just letting fear decide for you. And if we could just break down those barriers a bit and
just jump
welcome that change, we'd all be walking very different paths already.
Yeah, for sure. That's it. That's all I got.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for talking with me today. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
I was legit enchanted by this conversation. Unfortunately, this episode did not air in time for the workshop mentioned at the end of this interview, but there will be more coming up. All the ways to connect with Shay are listed in the show notes, with a very abundance of information being available on her website, transformwithshay.com. I did have the pleasure of experiencing a group session with Shay recently, and I have to say, any skepticism, any fear or reservations I may have had melted away, because Shay's light and love radiate in such a way that you just drop your walls and settle in to become open to finally learning how to step back into your own power and your own strength. Thank you, Shayleen, for your gift. I, for one, will be spending more time with you soon, and no doubt so many others will too. Thank you. Thank you for your service. And thank you to our listeners. If you loved what you heard today, please follow Shayleen. Follow her on social media and reach out to her for sessions of your own. Also, if you love this space, if you love being on this journey here at What's on Your Plate, please share this episode, rate it, and review it. Please offer suggestions on what you'd like to hear discussed here. That feedback form, is available in the show notes. Showing up here every week is one of my favorite things to do. Your support helps it be sustainable. I hope you have so much love this week. I hope you have light and laughter. And I hope you are brave and you connect with Shay so that you may heal too. So you can love even harder, shine even brighter, and laugh a whole lot longer. Until next time.